Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I am your host, and I'm here with my friend and trusty producer, Max Kerman. So, Max, this Ariana Grande concert, literally news just came out, I guess, in the last hour or something like that.
Basically just before I got on the Go bus. I was scrolling through Twitter and seeing this pretty tragic stuff.
So terrible news. We don't have a lot of details at all because it's pretty much just happened, but 19 people are dead in Manchester and over 50 are injured. And
those numbers might change.
They might change. Yeah. We don't know the cause yet. We don't know anything, but obviously it's just a pretty tragic thing when, you think about the type of people that go to an Ariana Grande concert. It's going to be kids.
Yeah, because, I saw Ariana Grande. The reason why I kind of want to just talk about it briefly a little bit is that I went to her concert in Toronto about, I want to say maybe a month ago with Lauren. And I was really struck just by the diversity in the crowd. There's definitely a lot of kids there. Like when I say kids, I mean 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds that are maybe there with their parents. There's definitely 16-year-olds that are there with a group of friends who are maybe going out to one of their first concerts. Yeah, just thinking about all the people there who are whose families are like literally still looking for them right now. I know that on Twitter there's been people are posting photos and, just trying to get in touch with their loved ones. So, it made me think because they still don't know the cause, but they're treating it like a terrorist act until they get further information. And the thing about stuff like this, where, an explosion goes off at a concert or a sporting event, it's terrorism at its most heinous and its most effective, meaning they want to take away the things that make people happy in a sort of free and open society so that you start questioning whether or not you want to go to something like a concert or, a soccer game. And that is literally sort of terror at its sort of most effective. Yeah, it reminded me of not only the stuff that happened in Paris at the Bataclan, but also the movie theater in, was it Denver? It was in Colorado.
Colorado, yeah.
And that was it Dark Knight?
It was a Dark Knight movie, yeah.
Yeah, and just how there are these spaces that you think are safe and that you want to feel really safe in and share this sort of communal activity that ought to bring you a lot of joy.
For you as a concert goer, like you said, you were just at the Ariana Grande concert in Toronto and also a performer. How much do you think this will make you think about, I guess, safety going forward, or is it something that you don't carry with you?
I've never really thought about it in the context of an Arkells concert, to be honest. But the thought did cross my mind, actually, when we were at Coachella, because I did see, those bomb-sniffing dogs and the amount of security and just, general, law enforcement in a very subtle way. But yeah, that definitely, if the aim is to cause terror, that's a pretty, that would be a place to start. Is like at a concert when people are trying to enjoy something together.
Our thoughts are with all the people who are affected tonight and maybe lost somebody or you can't find somebody. And when this airs, obviously on Wednesday, we'll have more information. But yeah.
But we wanted to touch on that because, the Arkells have toured in Manchester. I just saw an Ariana Grande concert. And it's definitely sort of part of the community that we're part of, which is, arts and entertainment and touring musicians and large-scale productions. And, we all know somebody who knows somebody who's probably living in that world right now.
Yeah. Okay, Max, let's shift gears. Today on the show, we have ESPN's Zach Lowe.
Yes, and we are going to perk up for this because this is something as devastating as the stuff is going on right now. We are very excited to have Zach on the program.
We were both huge Zach Lowe fans. And now for listeners that maybe you're a little bit like, oh, a writer, an ESPN writer, a basketball writer. Normally we have musicians or actors or directors or whomever. But this one actually was probably a bigger deal for both of us than anyone else we've had on the show.
Yeah, it was
like maybe Commander Chris Hadfield, the astronaut.
Yeah,
and then Zach Lowe.
Only because he has 19 PhDs. But after that, Zach Lowe, it was surreal. Honestly, I wasn't there for this interview, but you sent me the raw audio, and I was on tour, and I listened to it in my bunk, and I was just thinking to myself, this is the coolest / weirdest / most surreal thing to listen to your voice, a voice that I'm around all the time, and Zach Lowe's voice, who hosts a podcast that I never miss an episode for.
You listen to everyone.
Everyone. hear the two of you going back and forth. It was so cool.
It's funny because it's like after interviewing Zach Lowe now, you realize he's just a dude. He's a total dude that just goes about his work, does his job. So I even think about him listening to us right now, geeking out, and just being like, I've made a huge mistake going on that show.
Yeah, I know.
These guys are total fanboys. But the truth is, it's like for both of us, like, I love the NBA. I talk about it on this podcast all the time. Like that's my hobby. That's where I go to when I just want to like unwind. It's like I want to throw in a basketball game and just sort of get lost. And so you end up kind of becoming a big part of the culture of the NBA. And so you have like your more prominent writers and on-air personalities. You get into the NBA universe, and Zach is a huge part of that and one of the smartest writers. And we just both love reading him and listening to his show.
Yeah, sports is definitely for both of us who happen to have like some of the best jobs you could ever hope for. Like,
Yeah, we're doing all right.
I get to play in a rock and roll band. You get to produce and write for television. Like those are dream jobs. But even for people in dream jobs who like to have a little bit of escapism, the NBA is our escapism.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And anyway, so before those of you who aren't into basketball, turn off this podcast. I want to set up our fandom and why you might be interested in this conversation. And if you are into the NBA, then obviously you're saying, can you please shut the hell up and
just
get
skip to the interview?
Yeah. The interview is just look in the notes on the podcast.
Say where it starts.
Yeah. But so for me as a basketball fan, I started at a very young age. And I kind of want each of us to talk about our love for basketball just for a second.
Sure.
My gym teacher, his name is Mr. Nicholson, ended up being, he was the uncle for Jamal McGlure, who's one of Canada's most prominent basketball players. So when I was like 6 years old, I knew about this guy named Jamal McGlure, who was a Toronto high school phenom, who later went to University of Kentucky, one of the best programs, and then made the NBA. And he had like
he became an all-star.
An all-star. He played for, I want to say 12 years, 12, 13 years. He's still involved with the Toronto Raptors.
Yep.
And as a kid, as like a 10-year-old, my dad and I went to go see Jamal McGlure play at Eastern Commerce, which was the high school he went to, which was a powerhouse in Toronto. And I told my mom as a 10-year-old, like, Mom, I'm going to go to Eastern Commerce for high school. And she said, no, you're not. It's out of district and you won't make the team anyway. And I'm like, there's a pretty good chance I'll make the team. Anyway, I didn't go to Eastern Commerce. I definitely wouldn't have made the team, but I did play on my high school basketball team, and we weren't particularly good, but I did get some playing time as a result of sort of the low level of talent. And then when I was about, I want to say 12 or 13, Vince Carter came upon us.
Came into our lives.
And my first email address was Vince_Kerman@hotmail.com.
If listeners email that tonight, can you still get into that email address?
I don't think it's like working anymore.
All right.
But I was obsessed with Vince Carter. It got to the point where I have a memory of being 12 years old. Just like one afternoon, nothing in particular was happening. And I just started crying on my parents' couch because I didn't think I'd ever get a chance to meet Vince Carter. Just like
that thought just hit you, and you had to have a good cry.
Yeah, which kind of speaks to like how good I had it as a kid. Like if these were my problems. But then I got really lucky because my dad signed me up for the Vince Carter basketball camp, and there I got to stand about 10 feet away from Vince Carter. He came to the last day of camp, and that was a huge thrill. Later, actually, it was probably around the same time. I needed to do a project on a member of my community. That was like, you have to go out and find someone and interview them. And so what I decided to do was interview the general manager of the Toronto Raptors. And this was like kind of before anybody used email or anything. So basically, I just called the Toronto Raptors up, like at the head office. I was like, hello, is Mr. Glen Grunwald there? They're like, yeah, sure, 1 second. Got through right to his office. He picks up the phone. This is like back in 1999. So it seemed like anything was possible back then, I guess. And I said, hey, Mr. Glen Grunwald, can I do an interview on you? Because I need to interview someone in my community. And he said, okay. And then I got an interview, and I have photos with him. So shouts to Glen Grunwald. And now he went on to be the general manager / president of the New York Knicks.
That's right.
And now he works at McMaster University, my alumni. He's in the neighborhood. So
we should have him on.
What? Ooh, he'd be amazing, actually.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
We can't hit our listeners with too much sports in a row.
Okay, Glen Grunwald, we're coming for you. So, but that's my basketball story. So I hope that pumped you up a little bit for this interview. What's your how did you fall in love with hoops?
Okay, so I, as a young man, like as a kid, like, you know, when you're like, whatever, 9, 10, I loved hockey. And my brother and I would wake up every morning, we'd watch Sports Desk, which was like the kind of sports center of the time, and we'd eat our cereal, and I loved the Montreal Canadiens. And then when I got around like 13, 14, I got into music. I wanted to start a band, meet some babes, you know, like my priorities shifted, and I basically gave up sports. I was like, man, jocks, that's not where it's at. Like, I'm out on sports, and I left sports for a good long while. And then after I kind of came out of that, I started hearing rumblings like, oh, like the next Michael Jordan's playing, you know, in Toronto, you know, just down the street, because I'm in Hamilton at the time. And here's the thing, I wasn't even really into Michael Jordan during the Michael Jordan era. Like, I was out, man. Yeah. And so I heard that. I'm like, that's interesting. So I ended up kind of casually watching some basketball, like, because this Vince Carter guy was playing, and obviously he was like pretty spectacular. I like to call Vince my gateway drug, because once I started watching the game, I was like, this sport is the best sport of all time. On every possession, there's the potential for something spectacular to happen. It's like violent ballet. Like, I loved it. I loved everything about the way it moved. And then you start to learn, you know, you get to kind of like learn the game as you go. And then once you really get into it, all the characters, it's like a living movie. Like, the NBA is the best sport just to follow from pure comedy, just because the league is so ridiculous. And
the community around the NBA is so fun and smart.
Yeah.
And diverse. It's very cool.
And the characters are so rich. You know what I mean? Like, how often is there some sort of feud or something like that? But anyway, so we're very excited to have Zach Lowe on this podcast.
I hope that sets up this interview. And we talk about Zach's kind of work ethic. We talk about how he became a sports writer in the first place, what the ins and outs of his job look like, what his day looks like. So for people who are just interested in what it's like to work in the media, this is a really good interview, because he works for ESPN, which is, you know, one of the biggest media companies, period, in the world, and it should give you some insight into like what life is like in that industry.
Want to get to it?
Let's do it.
So, how you been? You're in Toronto quite a bit.
I'm in Toronto quite a bit. My in-laws are here. I spent about an hour in traffic yesterday coming back from the airport to their suburban locale, longer than the flight from Cleveland. But traffic here just gets worse and worse every time I come. It's like a nightmare.
It's pretty bad.
I budgeted 2 hours this morning to get from their house in North York to the arena, a trip I've made in 45 minutes before.
What did it take you today?
There was a moment where I thought I might not make it even in 2 hours because the subway was so slow, but it was like an hour and 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you made it.
I made it.
Yeah.
I made it.
All right. So, I mean, on this pod, we like to sort of get into the minutiae how people do their work, sort of how they got where they got. And so I kind of wanted to start, your dad is a legendary high school swim coach.
Wow. You did some background.
I did. I read an article in the Greenwich newspaper about your dad when he was retiring. It was a really nice piece that you actually tweeted out, I think, last year or the year before.
Yeah, I liked it. He's not on Twitter, so he doesn't know that. I don't think he knows what Twitter is, so he doesn't see anything like that.
And you were obviously a high school teacher.
Yes.
I guess my question would be, how has your upbringing helped shape your work ethic as a writer? Or in general, really?
I don't know that I have that unusual of a work ethic. This is a hard job, but I mean, I remember, you know, my dad was a teacher, is a retired teacher. Yeah. And he coached 2 sports. He coached water polo and he coached swimming, both like massively successful. He's in every like high school coaching hall of fame there is. And I just didn't really appreciate until I became a teacher the difficulty of teaching from 9 to 3, prepping classes. Like, I didn't realize that teachers had to like prepare. Like, you actually have to like figure out what you're going to do with these children for an hour. Which to me, that was the hardest part of teaching, actually figuring out what the hell we were going to do the next day or 2 days later. So to teach from 9 to 3, then there's like a half-hour break, then practice starts, and it's like 3:30 to 6. Then you go home. Then you have to like prep for the next day of teaching. And if I wanted help on my math homework, I was like this bratty little kid who was like, I need help. Like, I just now, like, I need help right now. And I didn't have any appreciation for, he's got 9,000 things. He's got to prep for the swim meet tomorrow. He's got to prep for his class. He's got to grade papers. And I became a teacher, and 3 o'clock would roll around, and I just wanted to die every day because I was so tired. I just wanted to take a nap on my desk and just just the mere thought of preparing for the next day was overwhelming. And I didn't coach a team, and I didn't have practice, and I didn't have anything like that. And like, somewhere along those lines, like my mom is just as hard of a worker. I just started of a job. Somewhere I just sort of by osmosis, you just figure out like to do your job well. That's what it is.
Did you go into teaching because your dad had been in it?
Probably. And my mom was an English teacher who became a social worker. So both public school, teachers / administrators growing up. I kind of went into teaching because I didn't know what the hell else to do. I was a history major in college, and everyone would, you go home from college and all your family friends that you have these mandatory things that you have to go to, be like, oh, so history major, you're going to go to law school? And I'd be like, no, why is that? Like, why is that point A to point B? And I just liked to read and think and write, and then I had to get a job, and I was like, I don't know what the hell I want to do. I like kids. I had coached in the summers and stuff, so I like being around kids. I was like, I'll try this. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Totally unqualified. Should never have been hired. And by the second year, I got good at it. And I think I would have been a good high school teacher had I stuck with it. And life didn't turn out that way.
So you start thinking about making a jump to reporting. You were doing crime reporting.
Yeah, there's a little step in between that maybe is not interesting, but yeah, I got into my mid-20s and I said, let's try this journalist thing.
Right. Was that a hard leap to make? Was it hard to sort of get into that business? Like, how do you just shift careers? Because once you're sort of established, it's hard to maybe... You
don't really. Like, I was a grad student at the time, and I was a history student getting a master's PhD, and I just was like, this is not what I want to do. Right. Like I don't want to sit in archives by myself and read these like documents from the 1800s. Let me do some like similar skills, but like stuff that people actually care about, stuff where I get to interact with like actual humans, and that was journalism. And I was 25 or 26 or something, and like that's just not how you get into journalism. Like, yeah. I would call newspapers and they'd be like, did you write for the college paper? No. Do you have an internship on your resume at a newspaper? No, nothing. I'm like this weirdo trying to transition into...
I'm just going to give it a go.
Yeah. And you can't do that. So I ended up taking out a whole bunch of student loans and going to journalism school, and for a year, it's just a 1-year program, and got okay at it and got a newspaper job, and that was all of a sudden like what I did.
And then you shift over to, was it Sports Illustrated?
Sports Illustrated. LeBron got me and a lot of other people hired.
Right.
Because after the decision, when he went to Miami, the response was so overwhelming that a lot of publications were like, we need more people covering this sport immediately. It caught people off guard, and Sports Illustrated was one of those publications, and I knew the right person who knew the right person.
That's interesting how, like, someone like LeBron makes a decision and literally this high tide rises all boats. Like, it transcends basketball and becomes a story that I guess everybody becomes interested in.
Yeah, and if you look back, I mean, there are a lot of writers who transition from scrappy part-time freelancing on the side about basketball to
full-time.
This gigs. Is my job now.
Yeah, the Heat Index.
Right, yeah, Heat Index, like right around August 2010, I got offered a job at the Heat Index, and it was the Heat Index or Sports Illustrated, and I ended up going to Sports Illustrated, but that's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, getting into your writing, you sort of have this gift for obviously combining like analytics with like a cerebral and entertaining style of longer form writing. And I mean, it's like really connected with NBA audiences, obviously.
I don't know about that, but I'll take it.
But it's uniquely like Zach Lowe, like you have a style like unto your own self. Was that style like a conscious choice? Did you see sort of like a hole in the market where you could sort of fill it? Or is it something you just did naturally?
Step one was a conscious choice. Step one was, I'm freelancing about basketball in my free time in the evenings. I cannot get credentials to games. I am not a reputable basketball writer, so I can't get interviews. I can't do anything like journalism and so what can I do? Well, I can describe what's going on in the game. I can describe the X's and O's. I can learn that because I don't need to be at the game to do that. And I did think it was like a little bit of an inefficiency where basketball, like the actually what was going on the court was not understood well enough, I didn't think. And some other people were trying to do it too, and I was like, that's the only way in I got. That's the only way that I can make my work stand out. If I can explain why the Celtics are using this pick and roll coverage and then why they changed it, and I can do it in a way that's readable, like that might be something to hold on to.
Was there some pushback maybe in that style or from editors where you're like, people aren't willing to go on this long of a journey or get this in depth?
I didn't really have editors then, so I could do
just doing your thing.
Could do what I want. I mean, certainly I still hear that now. I mean, I still hear, do people care this much about X, Y, and Z? And sometimes I definitely go over the line in detail, and like I have maybe not the best feel for what's interesting. And I have editors now who will pull me back or sometimes say, no, actually your instincts are right. Like, let's go down this rabbit hole and see where it goes.
What does your day look like? I mean, how much is consuming other writing, other podcasts, having conversations with NBA personnel?
All of it. Every day is kind of crazy.
Really? Is it like on the phone constantly?
No, it depends. It depends on the day. Like for instance, during the playoffs, I have a lot of not a lot, but I've had several sources text me the last few days, being like, "What are you hearing about Orlando's GM job? What are you hearing about the Hawks? Can I get in there? Whatever." And I say, like, during the playoffs, like, I just, like, I'm not on the phone as much. I'm not texting as much. I don't have my ear to the ground because I got to watch all these games. And in the first round, that's 3 games a night usually. And now it's 2 games a night. But, like, watching a playoff game is different for me than watching a regular season game. I take a lot of notes. It takes me much longer. I probably watch a playoff game in 2 hours versus a regular season game I can knock out in an hour and 10.
Will you do the full thing on League Pass? The full game in the regular season? Every game that happened that night?
I go tip off to garbage time. That's my rule.
Okay.
So I root for garbage time. Garbage time is a plus for me.
That's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, it sort of depends on the year. The more I watch, the less I have time to do other stuff.
Yeah. For my League Pass, I kind of wake up in the morning and I'll watch the last 5 minutes of the teams around the league, like Raptors front to back.
Yeah.
Because I'm a bleeding heart homer. But the rest of the games tend to get the last 5 minutes if they're close.
Yeah, and I've had many people, editors, saying, what would make your life easier is if you just did that. And I've tried it, and it's not the way I consume the game. It's just not the way I do it.
It speaks to how thorough you are. The fact that you're putting in that work.
It means I watch fewer. Like I get pieces of fewer games. Like so, I do 2 games a night, start to garbage time instead of 6 crunch times. You know what I mean?
you. Yeah. Oh, so you'll only pick 2 of the 6 that night.
Yeah, 2 of the whatever. Yeah.
Did you read that piece, the long form on Ernie Johnson?
I have not yet.
That was fast. His process is still pretty old school.
It's in my like list of things to read.
Do you consume a lot of other writers?
I do.
In your day to day?
Yeah. It changes. It's probably less than it used to be because I have other commitments that have taken more of my time. But for every game I don't watch, I try, so that can sometimes be on a busy Wednesday, that could sometimes be 9 games.
Sure.
On a quiet Thursday, that could be 2. I try to read one writer who I think is the best writer covering each of the 2 teams involved. Their summary of the game. And sometimes that's a blogger, sometimes it's a beat writer, sometimes it's whatever. But like, so if the Bucks play the Raptors and I didn't see it, I want Raptors Republic and I want like Brew Hoop or something like that.
Yeah.
I want to, so that's how I consume that. I consume a lot of that. And obviously, the big stories of the day sort of emerge and you read them.
Journalism can be pretty competitive, especially sports journalism. And, I think some writers can be like, shit, I didn't get that scoop. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Are you like, hey, we're all in this, we're all reporting? Or are you hyper competitive when it comes to that sort of thing?
Luckily, breaking news is not the basis of my job.
Of course. But I mean, you still do get nuggets.
I get nuggets. I'm glad you notice. I try to break news in a little bit of a different way. But it's not like I am not one of the people who's pulling my hair out when Woj tweets yesterday about Mike Budenholzer stepping down from the Hawks. Like that's like that's he's the best at that. I can't compete with that. I'm not going to get that story, and that's cool. But sometimes I'm on a story, and there are stories that I'm on that take time to report, and I need to get them right, and they're sensitive. So I may know something right now that is true, but to really report the story, I need to call 4 or 5 different people to confirm it, flesh it out, and I need one person who's telling me it to give me the go-ahead to make those 4 or 5 calls, and I'm waiting for that, and I know like someone else is going to hear this and get the green light sooner. Who knows? And so sometimes I have stories and it eats at me a little bit. There was one recently that really got me. But
would you share it?
Yeah, when the Jazz GM went on Woj's podcast and Dennis Lindsay, and spilled the beans about Utah's concerns that they're officiated unfairly. I had been, I'm not going to say sitting on that, but sitting around that for a while. like 3 or 4 months, and it was partly my fault because I just sort of let it linger. It was so sensitive for the Jazz that I was like, I'm going to wait until they sort of feel like it's the right time to follow up. And I didn't follow up diligently enough. But when that came out, that one was a punch to the gut.
I mean, have you ever had a source or a subject legitimately pissed off at you after a story?
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it just come with the territory?
Unfortunately, yes. It's an unpleasant part of the job.
I guess anecdotally, what was maybe the worst one? You don't have to name names. But if you'd like to, I'm down.
Just, if you know too much about a team, they get upset. If you know too much about trade talks they've had, and you report it, and even if you tell them what you should do, that you're going to report it and give them a chance to respond and all that, they just don't like a lot of their business out there. So any column where there's a lot of their business out there, they don't tend to like it very much.
You get a call personally?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But everyone is. It's not bad. It's like it gets tense and you go have your ups and downs, but it's like professional. It's not. It's
sure.
Not, yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's never too personal because ultimately this is your jobs.
Yeah. I mean, certainly some relationships will go on their ups and downs, over time, but it's never,
A lot of your business is like making these personal connections, making sure you're connected. How natural, I guess, was it for you to interact and schmooze and sort of like build these bridges? Is that something you had to develop, or were you sort of always able to connect with people?
I'm a decent schmoozer. I like to talk. I always like my wife and I have these. My wife hates networking. She's like, I hate networking. To me, networking's a bad word. Networking is like, I always tell her, just think of it as you are meeting a stranger who's interesting, and it probably in a related field. Like, you might be friends with this person in a different life. Just think of it as like a fun social conversation, and like there's an 80% chance it goes really well, and there's a 20% chance you've wasted an hour, but who cares? Like, it's so I like meeting new people. I like dinner. I like beer. I like coffee. I like all the things that center around these conversations. So it's easy for me. Ironically, the reason I didn't get into journalism when I was younger is because I was super shy and not good at that at all. And if you had told me that when I turned, when I got into my late 20s, I'd be good at it, my 18-year-old self would have been like, no way. Like, that's why I couldn't knock on doors and have conversations with strangers and all that stuff you have to do.
Yeah. What do you think changed?
I don't know. I got older and
just more comfortable in yourself.
More comfortable and more secure or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't do it when I was 18, 19. I had friends. I was normal in that sense. But like, there's that, and then there's talking to strangers, and like, I wasn't good at that.
I was a huge fan of Grantland, as I think a lot of people were. And as years like passed, I think the legend of Grantland sort of grows and grows. I think it's become this. I mean, it always was this great thing.
Yeah, we're like a musician that died too young or
exactly.
something. Yeah, it's almost good for us in retrospect.
Yeah, that it went too soon, so then it will always sort of be evergreen for people. I guess I want to ask, like, what are Bill Simmons' strengths as like an editor and a creative, and what made that site special to you?
He hires good people, and I'm not talking about me. I mean, you just look at the Bill Barnwell, Jonah Carey. I mean, you could go on and on. The music writers, the pop culture. Look at the people he's discovered. Jason Concepcion, Network.
He's hilarious.
Shea Serrano. Shea Serrano is a best-selling New York Times best-selling author. Shea Serrano. I mean, think about that. 3 or 4 years ago, that was not a possible thing. And he has faith in people to do well when given space and a responsibility. Like, he doesn't micromanage. The reason he hired me was like, he said this publicly before. He said, you're writing 3 or 4 times a day at Sports Illustrated. There's only, the ceiling on your work is only so high when you have to write that much. The ceiling on how good each individual thing can be. Like, I have faith that you could do really good work if we wrote 3 times a week instead of 3 times a day. And you're going to have some learning curve and some screw ups, but like, let's see what happens. And he just he has faith in people to do their jobs and sort of play up to responsibility instead of or freedom. Sort of like, he has faith in people's ability to function and work hard if given freedom instead of sort of relaxing and being lazy.
Did you read him before?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So you were
since
a fan?
college.
Or? Yeah. I feel like everybody has a major like Simmons phase. He rarely writes anymore, but
well, I mean, I remember where I was when I got an email from him popped up in my inbox, and I thought my first response to my now wife was that someone was playing a prank on me, that it wasn't a real thing.
It was like a fake email handle?
Yeah, I thought someone has just gotten, one of my friends to be a jerk has gotten this fake email, and it's this whole thing introducing himself as fake. I thought it was all fake.
Well, that's fascinating, because that's kind of like, that's I guess a big moment. Someone that you read has a platform, reaches out to you. What are you feeling in that moment? Are you thinking like, shit, this is a huge opportunity, like I'm kind of all in, or are you trepidatious, or are you like, do you see him as a peer at that point, or are you kind of just
no. I did not see him as a peer. I was excited. My natural state of mind is like, I will find a way to screw this up somehow. And so that was next. And then probably panic about like, I don't really know how to handle this. Like, what is Sports Illustrated going to say? And if it gets down that far, but I'm mostly excited.
When you were making the move, I mean, you got to stay in New York, right? So it wasn't going to be a life-changing move. But is that something that do you discuss all career stuff with your wife? Are you like, I'm thinking about this, I'm bouncing it off her?
Oh yeah. She, you say you marry your deficits. Like, she is a very...
I've never heard that. That's good.
She is a very, like, I'm cautious and pessimistic and anxious. She is brave and courageous and strong. And I was like, look, honey, Grantland's only a year old. Sports Illustrated is Sports Illustrated. It will never die. It's a titan. Grantland is this new thing. And she was like, was like, this is Bill Simmons. Like, this is going to be all right. This is like a different kind of job for you. It'll be good. Like, have an adventure. Be adventurous. Go for it. And she pushed me over the edge. That sounded bad. She pushed me over the edge. She pushed me to take the job.
Yeah. She pushed you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Although you're a writer, you do TV. You have a podcast, great podcast. And in modern media, it seems, I guess, all this stuff is kind of necessary if you're going to have a platform and grow your brand, or whatever you want to call it. Talk about how you sort of adopted to this new model, and like, I guess, what you enjoy about it and what's the most challenging.
I did not.
Did you always want to be like on radio or be a voice?
I did not adopt to it. I was forced into it. David Jacoby, who I'm sure you have heard of from Jalen and Jacoby,
sure,
called me one day and said, "You know what I think we're going to do? We're going to have a Zach Lowe podcast." And I said, "I don't want to do that. I don't need an extra thing to do." And we argued about it good-naturedly for 3 or 4 months. And finally, I was like, "All right, I'll write one less thing a week, and I'll do a podcast." Because I knew how I was. I knew that I wouldn't just wing it on a podcast, that like I'd prepare and I would try really hard to get good guests, and it would take time. So I eventually won that and really sucked at podcasting. Some people still think I really suck at podcasting. But I've gotten better at it. I get different kinds of guests, and it's fun. I mean, I probably still over prepare, but but yeah, I was sort of dragged kicking and screaming into like having my actual voice be out there.
Yeah. Do you enjoy the TV stuff?
Yeah, TV's fun. TV is like, it's harder than people think, but it's also has this quality where like, and it's part of what makes TV a little troubling is that, not troubling, but the downside of it is that there's just so much of it that unless you say something grossly offensive or just unbelievably dumb, it's just forgotten almost immediately. And so that's sort of the thing that I grapple with. But TV's hard, and it's also it's really fun. Like, particularly when you have a host like Rachel who's really good. I love doing Rachel's show.
Yeah. Sorry.
Just want to set the room up for tonight.
Can you give us 10 minutes?
Sure.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about TV.
TV.
Yeah, that's live. That happens, and you just got to roll with it.
We just kept going.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I'll probably cut it out.
Okay.
Or maybe I'll keep it in.
Who knows?
So shifting gears a bit, like I work for a big media company called Bell Media.
Yes.
I think we own half of the Raptors or something like that, and Leafs. About 2 years ago, we laid off about like 400 people, one of them being my brother who worked at the company. So, when I hear the ESPN news, it sort of like hits home for us a little bit. And I'm sorry to hear that, because I'm sure you have colleagues and friends that all got hit pretty hard.
It's not fun.
No, it's pretty brutal. And I guess my question would be, the media landscape is changing so much. Like, where do you see it heading? Like, is there a good outcome?
Boy, I feel like I've been a journalist for 13 years, and I think for all 13 of those years there has been like uncertainty hanging over our heads wherever I've been working. The first newspaper I worked for was a Tribune company paper. Tribune went bankrupt when I was there. The second place I worked, American Lawyer magazine, just constantly has layoffs all the time. Sports Illustrated has had downsizes. ESPN now. I don't know what the end game is, other than everything seems to be trending to more video, more social media, more all that. But I don't have my pulse on that kind of stuff.
Right. Do you think it keeps shrinking? Do you think there is like sort of a lack? Do you think there isn't enough jobs to sort of fill what maybe it had in the past?
It does seem to be that way. But then you see some of the big publications like the Times seems to be hiring. The Washington Post hired people. I mean, I do. Hopefully, there's always a place for quality work, but it does seem to be sort of a continuous. I mean, you have some papers that publish 2 or 3 times a week now. They used to publish 7 days a week, so that requires fewer jobs. It does seem to be sort of a continual shrinking, and I say that not having researched it deeply, right. But it does feel like there are just fewer and fewer jobs. Personally,
when something like the seismic shift that happened when Bill was sort of ousted at Grantland, and then obviously what just happened at ESPN, what's going through your mind when that kind of stuff happens, or you see that, or you start hearing rumors?
Obviously, anxiety. What's happening? What's behind it? Who's okay? Who's not okay? Am I okay? I mean, Grantland was a different thing because Bill was so central to what it was that when that happened, I remember exactly where I was. I was in a hotel in Washington, D.C. It was May. It was the second round of the playoffs. I was there to write about the Wizards, and I was in my room, and Richard Sandomir from the New York Times, tweeted something about Bill, his contract not being renewed, and that was like, are we all out of jobs immediately? That was like, is Grantland just dead now? Yeah. Because he was so central to its presence. This one was different and sort of long simmering and long rumored, but yeah, of course, just anxiety. What's happening? Is my job different? Do I have a job?
Is the communication there, like, from the top down good, or are you reading these reports like everybody else? Like, for instance, you don't have to speak to this, but the Deadspin piece about Woj coming over, and did you read that at all?
I did, and I am not going to speak on it, and I can honestly say I'm not qualified to speak on it. One of the good things about living in New York is that I'm not in Bristol and I'm not in Los Angeles. Might be good and bad. I'm like out of the loop. Which helps me answer this question honestly, because I am out of the loop, but sometimes I think I need to be in the loop a little more, but I am out of the loop.
Gotcha. Lastly, and then I might hit you with one Raptors question.
Oh, sure.
I should.
We haven't talked about the Raptors yet.
I know. Well, I want to know about Zach Lowe, and I feel like I get my Raptors fix from you in general. You're very good about writing about them. I know that fans in places like Utah and Milwaukee and Toronto can be like, nobody writes about us.
But Toronto has a different... Toronto, I call them the Spooky Mulder Toronto fans who really, I think a small segment of them really think that there is a vast conspiracy against a Canadian team. Yeah. So I call them the Spooky Mulder fans. But yeah, they're always like, there's always, like, I remember Brian Windhorst, who's here right now, wrote a big story about DeMar DeRozan that was on the front page of ESPN.com for like all day. And even on that day, I had Raptors fans tweeting at me like, oh, when is the American media going to figure out that the Raptors are going to play? The American media has DeMar DeRozan on the front page of its existence right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I got off on a rant.
No, I hear you. Actually, well, now that we're talking about the Raps, do you think that Masai should re-sign Kyle? Do you think he should throw the whole boat at him?
He's going to have to throw something close to the whole boat, I think.
But should he?
Given what Kyle has done for the franchise. If they just get rolled right here, these next 2 games, if there's just no hope, if you come out of this series thinking the gap between us and LeBron is such a chasm, I don't know if it's Kyle or Serge or DeMar or something, but I just don't think you can bring back that whole group and pay $150 million plus luxury tax for it. I don't know who goes, but I don't think you can bring back that whole group.
Do you think you could bring back that group with a new voice?
A new coach?
Yeah. Like, I don't think you can bring it all back. Like, I don't think you can bring the whole band back together if they get rolled. Like
I
you
think
said.
Dwayne has done a good job here, and Dwayne just got extended. I think
he's a good
after
coach. We
last
got
season,
3 years left now after this.
and that doesn't stop teams when they want to make changes. I mean, we say that, you know, and there are teams that are paying 3 or 4 coaches at once sometimes in the NBA because they fire everybody. But this does not strike me as a situation where the coaching is what's separating them from the Cavs. Now we'll see how they play. We said this last year, and they won 2 games at home. This doesn't feel like that will happen again, but you never know.
You never know. All right, I'm going to finish with a question about writing, in the sense that your peers have gone on to write books. Most recently, Windhorse, who just mentioned.
Yeah,
Abrams.
Abrams is a beast.
Yeah. Simmons obviously has written a few books. Is writing a book of your own on the radar for you? Is it in the future? Do you think about it? No, not having it.
I think about it, and that I actively do not want to do it. It seems like an enormous amount of work, and if I was going to do it, I would do it like Abrams has done it, where you sort of you drop, not everything, because he's written a few features over the last year or so, but where you drop a lot. And that becomes how you spend all your time. Like, I can't imagine what someone like Jonah did writing a book while also covering baseball full time at Grantland, or what Brian did covering the Cavs, and Brian and Dave McMenamin covering the Cavs, and then in the summer after they win the title, covering NBA free agency and writing a book and all that at the same time. That doesn't fit well with me, with my lifestyle. So I also don't have a good idea for a book. So right now, not on the radar.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, Zach. I really
No
appreciate
problem,
it,
man. My pleasure.
Welcome to the dessert. Our friend and pop culture aficionado Shane Cunningham literally just walked into Max's house and sat down. Welcome to the studio / dining room. Shane, what's going on?
Hey, I'm a little out of sorts, and Max might know why. I'm not sure if Michael know why.
I don't know.
I don't know why.
Well, there's actually 2 reasons, but one of them is this is the Bachelorette right now.
That's
right.
right.
The Bachelorette's on right now.
Yeah, this is the premiere episode.
I'm part of a pool, actually, with, so I didn't even tell you about this, Shane, but Jared from Letterkenny asked me to be in his Bachelorette pool.
Why?
I don't know.
No, but why is he asking you? Are you friends with him?
Yeah, we've hung a couple times.
How?
He came to our Montreal show.
Former podcast.
Is he a fan?
I think so. And
He's a really nice guy, eh?
super nice guy.
Like he literally says please and thank you in the same sentence. You notice that? He'll order a drink. He'll be like, can I have a Caesar, please and thank you?
One of those, yeah.
Do you notice he does that?
No, I've never picked that up, but I believe it.
Hey, Max, do you want to be in my Bachelorette pool, please and thank you?
Good invitation.
But who are you picking?
We did, I even forget who. Lauren and I are doing a team together, and I forgot who we chose.
How much money do you win if you get it?
I don't even know those details.
Okay. And the other reason I'm a little out of sorts, I actually had like a kind of harrowing experience just now. Like
Just
I'm
now?
still like shaken up from it. Actually, it was kind of crazy. Like,
Okay.
so, Mike and I have a boss. You know him, Randall.
Yeah.
And he's really nice guy, but he's also kind of intimidating, right? So we go up to his cottage, and I'm not saying I'm on my best behavior, but I definitely don't want to like fuck anything up or ruffle any feathers at all. So and he has like meal plans. You're supposed to make meals, and for that I feel a lot of pressure on that. So all week, I want to say Alex and I, but like just to be honest, Alex was prepping meals all week and testing them. Like literally 2 days in the week, she woke up at 5 a.m. to like put in meat in a thing so it could like simmer for 5 hours or whatever. So like there was a lot of pressure on this week just for the meals, which I thought would be the biggest problem.
So for this cottage, you get meal assignments. So then, like, if you go with a couple couples, you'll do like breakfast one day and lunch another day. So what you're saying is that your wife was prepping these meals in the week leading up to the cottage.
Just to make sure they were good.
And just like a little back history about me, like I always say, like I was kind of like raised by wolves.
Your mom's totally insulted.
Meaning, like, not to, I love you, mom and dad, but like I never learned how to drive or wash a dish, or I never mowed the lawn or did laundry. Like no one would ever let me do anything. So even something as rudimentary as washing a dish really stresses me out. Like I don't even know how to wash a dish by hand. I didn't even know how to like load a dishwasher up until I just bought a home. You know, I'm really like nervous in what anyone else would consider a normal scenario, right? Like, hey, someone cooks a meal, someone washes the dishes. So I'm equally concerned about the meal and the dishes. Anyway, all that stuff goes fine, right? Like we planned for it, all that goes fine.
You practice
You're
scrubbing
prepped.
dishes.
Alex has my back. She's made sure the meals taste delicious. We go overboard. The meals go over crazy. Then in the nighttime, we have a few drinks. I sit by the fire. Of course, the first chair I sit in by the fire, it just smashes. Just break. I know I've gained a few pounds, but like it was super embarrassing. It just explodes. But Randall's cool that it's not that big of a deal. Rest of the weekend goes by perfectly. Like we killed it. Like Alex is a big hit in social situations like this. I'm thinking I get out of it scot-free. I hug everyone. I go to leave. And just to let you know about Randall's layout, he has a very steep incline to get down to his cottage. So it's like a hill like this. It's almost like a straight drop. But if you have a pretty good car, you can make it down and make it up.
Oh, no.
Most people park at the top of the hill. But I park down beside Randall's, like, you know, good car that's like a 4x4 or whatever. That's
Four-wheel
meant for.
drive, yeah.
Four-wheel drive. So one time I went down
know
there,
where this is going.
and Randall's like, you know, hey, you shouldn't have driven your car down here. Don't worry. I'll drive it back up the hill for you. So we're like, okay, good. We're going to the Walmart to buy Alex's mom a gift for her birthday, which is what I just gave her. So he drives it up the hill. He goes, actually, this car is a shit ton of pep. He's like, this is a peppy car. This car can make it up here fine. So I'm like, oh, sweet. He's like, yeah, just drive it back down when you come back from the trip. So I'm like, okay. I drive down the mountain. Right.
I don't even know you drive.
I know. I learned to drive. I got my license when I was 30.
This is right after you learned how to do a dish.
Yeah. This was no. I learned how to drive right before I learned how to do a dish. But you know, my first car oddly was a stick shift.
Really?
Yeah, it was. I learned how to drive stick. My friend Bert, actually, I was friends with a 67-year-old man. He's like my best friend, and he taught me how to drive. So, anyway, as I'm leaving, I wanted to ask Randall, like, oh, what's the key to get up the hill? But he said the car had a lot of pep. So I hug everyone. We just had this great week, like bonded with everyone. I'm like closer to the boss than ever. I go to drive up the hill, and as I'm getting up, it gets stuck near the top. No. So we're at the top of the hill, basically like with a straight drop going back. And I'm like, oh shit. But I just put the brake on and I go down and back up. But all of a sudden I backed up too far. And now I realize I'm kind of dangling over a cliff. So I'm about to teeter and the car's about to roll into the cottage.
Oh, good God.
And my boss just sold this cottage.
Oh.
And he just bought like an awesome new cottage. So this was this May 2 for a weekend was actually like a sayonara, like farewell to his
Randallland.
To Randallland, it's called. So the car is teetering on the edge, about to roll over a couple times, potentially kill me and ruin the cottage. So Alex instinctively hops out of her end, because she's in the passenger seat, which throws the car even more off kilter. And now I'm definitely about to roll over. But luckily, Randall and all the people see this and they're like, oh shit, and they run out. And then I had to stop the car, put the emergency brake on as they held it from rolling into the cottage. And then I didn't know this, but the car had like different gears to it. And you can put it in like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Like, you know what that mode is? And then I put it in 1 and they all had to push me up the hill and get me out of that scenario. So that was how I left the thing, as everyone was like freaking out as I did that and like so thankful that I didn't ruin the cottage or kill myself.
Jeez.
So I just came from that right now. So I'm like totally on edge right now.
So you feel like this great weekend did not end on the best note?
No, it was hugely just embarrassing because like everything went over so well until that.
You're wearing a pretty cool pair of jeans that I recognized from a lot of Facebook posts.
Oh man.
Yeah. A lot of people are like, a couple people on Facebook are kind of making fun of me for being in the Topman ad.
So let's give some context for this. This is good.
So some context. We went to Coachella. Topman was nice enough to sponsor our episodes and our whole weekend down there and hook us up with some sweet clothes. We did some photos that we thought were going to be for like
We
the
weren't
Much
even quite
Instagram.
sure. Yeah,
It was like the Much Instagram, the Micah Much Instagram, maybe the Topman Insta or something like that. We were it was very loose. Everything was moving so quick. And we're kind of like just going, cool.
It happened last minute. Like, oh, by the way, that you guys got a sponsor. We're like, oh, sweet. This is great.
I'm literally about to fly to Manitoba to do the shoot that I'm doing. And I look in the Champagne Boys group. My brother screen grabs a Topman ad, like an actual just legitimate Topman ad. And it's the three of us walking through desert like assholes in the and I was like,
But there's no mention of the pod. It was like we were just the 3 hired models.
no context.
So do you think that's awesome or not cool? Or
The vain
very
part of me
cool?
thinks it's kind of awesome. Because we're like, could we be models? You know?
Well,
It's like we're not here because we're like, affiliated with anything else.
Well, Alex, her ex-boyfriend, messaged her and was like, "What the?" and like
really?
screen grabbed a picture of me in these Topman ads.
Imagine if these ads are what rekindled their relationship.
That'd just be weird. But yeah, it's funny. Like people kind of think we have a modeling gig,
Yeah, which is kind of sweet.
and it's on Topman's real Instagram, I think.
They're paying for ads that are
Yeah,
popping up in
they're showing up.
places.
The ads are showing up in my feed on Facebook regularly. But anyway, it's cool. What do you think of it? Are you stoked about your new?
I'm a little shaken up right now, man.
That's it. That's all. That's our episode. Thanks so much for listening.
Mike on Much podcast can be found on Twitter and Instagram. That was a weird way of saying it. Mike on Much is our handle. You can download. Please subscribe to the show. Leave a comment. Shane is just muttering into himself right now.
Eating crackers and muttering.
Please leave a comment and a rating in iTunes because that really helps the show grow. Huge thank you to Jenna Gregory, who provides the artwork. You can check out her stuff at jennasdoodles.com.
The Mike and Much podcast is produced by Max Kerman. I'm your host, Mike Bierman. See you next week.